But ultimately what we're trying to do is we're working for a hormetic response, which is our body's ability to become stronger even though we have stressors. With a hormetic response, if you don't stress yourself at all, you become weaker. And so we see that we become less resilient in the absence of certain stressors. If we stress ourselves too much, we can kill ourselves. But if you give yourself the right amount of stress and you give yourself the right amount of recovery, then you can come back stronger and more resilient.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Sober Strength Show. I'm your host, Jesse Karajat. For this episode, I'm super pumped. We haven't really done a deep dive, pun intended, on cold exposure and or breath work. Those are two tools that I'm really wanting to incorporate in my own daily and weekly practices for overall health. And I've got the perfect guest to come on. He's an expert on both of those areas. His name is Jesse Coomer. Cut his teeth and really made a name for himself on the breathwork side of things, but also super knowledgeable on the cold exposure and even some supplements. And we talk about that in this episode. He's an author. He's also a coach and a speaker. Just does great stuff. He's got an awesome personality. Just a great episode. And I'm super pumped to bring him to you. Check out the episode notes and resources. You can find him. And I put all the links in there. So all the places to follow Jesse Coomer. And without further ado, welcome to the Sober Strength Show. Let's go deep. The first time another Jesse has joined me on the show. So pleasure to have you.
And it's Jesse C. So we even have the same initials. So we'll just, I don't know, we'll have to come up with nicknames or something.
Well, what's your middle name?
Aaron?
We diverge there. I'm Jesse James.
Okay, all right. At least we have that.
Yeah, Jesse James. All right, man. We're gonna jump right into it. So I'm stoked to have you on the show because for two reasons. One, breath work, cold exposure, two things that I know are great and I know that I suck at and I need to incorporate into my tool belt for my own mental health, right? So like selfishly, I'm stoked to just sit here and learn from you, but then also, of course, I'm excited for my audience to do the same thing. So we'll start with breath work. How would you describe breath work? And then let's kind of move into how it can help people, maybe particularly that are looking for emotional health or mental health, or even more in like the recovery realm. But starting with breath work, how would you describe it?
I want to actually just sort of identify what most of the time when people hear the word breath work, a lot of times the only thing they're thinking about is psychedelic breath work, which, hey, that's part of breath work. There's the original breathworks in the West, things like rebirthing, holotropic breathwork, vivation. There's a lot of history that there is in that space where it specifically is for the purpose of having a non-ordinary state of consciousness. And there's a lot of different views on what happens there. Scientifically, we understand a lot more than we used to, but we're still learning a lot when it comes to that style of breathwork. But now the word breathwork means a little bit more than that. And so we've seen multiple generations of breathworkers come through. And currently, when you say breathwork, at least the current generation of breathworkers typically is looking at breathwork as the use of breathing for interfacing with your physiology and your nervous system in some way. So when you talk about, for instance, my school of breathwork that I lead, we are working with our unconscious and conscious processes. And this leads into ultimately where we can benefit from using breathwork. So one of the things that we often misunderstand is sort of what we are. A lot of times we think, okay, I've just got this top-down situation where I have this mind and I've got this body and I drive around in this body, and consciousness is basically the thing that I experience. I can make decisions rationally and go on and with my life. And in reality, we now understand that we have variations of that. And so most of what we are unconscious processes that steer us around, and we only sort of believe that we're making these choices rationally, when in reality, most of our choices are made on an unconscious level. This, of course, impacts us in every aspect of our lives. And one of the most obvious ones is our emotions, right? So your emotional state colors your situation. So using breath, we can speak back into this system. And typically what we're trying to do is we're trying to speak back safety back into the system so that you can make a better decision. Or at least that is my goal as a breath worker. Now, there are multiple applications that you can do when it comes to using breath. One, I work with a lot of first responders. So when I'm working with first responders, what we're really trying to do is, of course, in those major moments of heightened stress, we know that the centers of our brain that are responsible for rational thought, they start to shut down. So what we're trying to do is keep them on as long as possible. So we want to train the officers, the firefighters, the EMS, all branches to know, okay, you've got some strategies to use when it hits the fan. And then we also have other strategies that we use to build flexibility in your nervous system, so you have the presence of mind to actually do those techniques. We work with athletes. We can improve an athlete's overall HRV. We can improve an athlete's ability to recover, stay focused, go stronger for longer in their respective sports. You can apply breath to everything because how we breathe is connected to every aspect of our physiology and our nervous system. So, whereas at one time, and still to many people to this day, if they hear breath work, they just think, okay, this is a way of sort of having a non-ordinary state. Now, the application of breath to everything is, when we say breath work, that is more of what we're starting to mean. And that's ultimately the newer definition of the word.
Got it. So much there in your first answer, consciousness, all these things. I want to double click on one thing that you said, and I have a question.
I like that.
Yeah, I'm going to ask you to restate it. There, you said something around speaking safety.
Yeah.
Can you say that again? Just that one.
Yeah. So this is an interesting thing about being a human. So something that we often forget is that our brain, or you know what? It's actually something that we don't forget because no one ever told us. Our brain is a predictive and reactive organ. So what that means is we are constantly predicting what we believe the world is going to be. And there's all sorts of research on even the fact that quite literally, we are sort of living in a controlled hallucination at all times. That a lot of times we think, okay, the light comes into our eyes and then it processes, and that's how we know where we are. The reality is your brain predicts how things are based off of the last messages that it got and how it perceives the world. And it double checks to make sure that's true using your senses, which is interesting. And it's different than what a lot of times we believe it is. But because of that, it's constantly trying to predict what's going on in the outside world. And the other thing about us as humans is that we tend to want to believe things are worse than they are. And that is a mechanism that is foundational in the human organism because, as my mentor, Dr. Artem Music, he always says, you only had to get unlucky once in the ancient world, right? So we tend to think that there are more dangers out there, maybe even than there actually are.
To protect ourselves instinctively.
To protect ourselves. Safety, right? We need to survive. And so if you're constantly worried and you're stressed and you're full of anxiety, strangely enough, and I know that, it's no fun, but it's preferable to dying. And that is what your unconscious processes are saying. Hey, listen, it's better if we just ruminate and can't stop thinking about this thing and you can't sleep and you're just always on, because what if there's a danger? And this can apply to everything. And for instance, when I train athletes, I always kid, there's two ways I can make you run as fast as you humanly possibly can. One, I can pull out a gun and point it at you and, and make you run for your life. I can use fear, right? Fear is a great motivator, or I can help you feel safe enough to push yourself that hard. And it's a far better strategy to make you feel safe enough to push yourself that hard, because eventually, the fear is not going to be there. And you can actually train this. You can train safety back into your nervous system. And we do this using breathing. And there's an enormous amount of research, especially over the past 2 decades, that shows that regular breathwork practices using interoceptive awareness, so internal awareness, so we're able to sort of bring our awareness inside, that we're able to train that unconscious part of yourself that is always seeking danger and always looking out to feel safer. And when that happens, you're more comfortable, you're more confident, and you're less reactive. For instance, the first responder is under heavy stress, or the athlete, or you name it. That person is less likely to just make a rash decision based in fear, and is more likely to make a rational decision because they're coming at it from a position of safety.
Yeah. And so if people have kind of like a baseline as it relates to that perception of fear, if people's baseline is relatively normal, I'm assuming you're working with them to train them to be even more kind of durable emotionally, if that's not the right language. But how do you go about also maybe like retraining someone that has been exposed to trauma or was raised in circumstances or environments that were constantly punitive or had pain? Like how does that work?
So what happens is, when we are in a situation where we are unable to fight or flight, right? So our nervous system is primed. We're in this danger situation. We don't have the option to run away, or we don't have any kind of agency. There's a number of things that happen unconsciously that are there to help you. But sadly enough, that tends to lead to trauma, and that leads to you doing more and more danger seeking, or just expecting, right? So you're just expecting these dangers, and there's certain triggers that it will manifest them. So what we try to do is a few things. One, we're working on building more flexibility into that nervous system. For instance, we can start to stimulate what we call the vagus nerve. So the vagus nerve is a nerve that connects basically almost all your organs. And when we stimulate it, we train ourselves to become less what we call sympathetic dominant. So sympathetic dominant is basically our action mode. And when we're in the parasympathetic state, that is more of our relaxed safety mode. Or sometimes we might call that our social engagement system. So what we try to do is, first of all, try to help a person become more resilient in daily life. And the issue of overcoming trauma. Okay, so you might, in the world of breathwork, there's a lot of claims when it comes to trauma, because breathwork has been very effective at helping a person be able to process their trauma. In many forms of breath work, you're stimulating your limbic system, and you're able to process trauma in a way that maybe you didn't feel comfortable doing in everyday life. And so, for instance, this is a time when we can do the non-ordinary states. So it's more of a psychedelic style. But what I've also found is that you have to sort of teach yourself to be a new person, and that is something that takes time. So I got high once for 10 years. And I, after 10 years, it's hard to know who you are, right? Without that thing, right? And one of the biggest things that I tell to people who are overcoming addiction is you have to decide you're not going to be that person anymore. You have to, but you can't be a not person, right? It's not like you just erase this thing and then, okay, everything's gone. No, you need to create this new image of who you are. And this is called implicit learning. It's the strongest form of learning. It's something you cannot consciously decide. I'm going to implicitly learn who I am. I'm just going to decide that today. You have to witness yourself being that new person. And so while we work with a person to help process a lot of those emotions, we also start to help a person feel safe enough to take actions that help them see themselves as someone who has more agency, someone who is capable of doing things, someone who is not afraid of X, Y, and Z anymore. And that takes time. But the beautiful thing is, and the good news I want to give everybody, is that it is absolutely possible. And we see this with people who have trauma. We see this with people, like I've had clients who've had phobias. I can't drive on the highway, or, and so over time you retrain yourself. I am a person who does this. I can be a person who can do this thing. And so it's something where there's no magical breathwork technique that makes everything all better, right? But there are techniques, when correctly applied, you can start to process in the now, and you can start to recreate and relearn who you are as a person maybe who's capable, who is safe, who's able to go out there and take the actions that actually do make your life better.
Yeah. Now, is this normally combined with some form of talk therapy or other, type of mental health counseling? Is it a standalone? What does that look like?
Yeah, it can be. And what I do a lot of times I'll work in tandem with a therapist. Although nowadays, most of my students are therapists. When it comes to mental health, this is a modality that it is such a scientifically sound modality when applied correctly, that you can apply it in talk therapy alongside it. So I have multiple students. So I run a breathworker training program. So I certify people in the language of breath, philosophy of breath work. So very steeped in neuroscience, very steeped in psychology. And they have added it to their practice. And so right now, what's really exciting is I'm working with a school counselor here in the Chicago area who trained with me. And then he's done some basic preliminary research that shows these students who have high anxiety, high stress, very difficult dealing with just every day at school. It was either 6 months or it was a full year of school. We're able to see really significant results, and they feel a lot more confident that they know, okay, when I experience stress, anxiety, etc., I have tools. I'm not helpless, which is a huge benefit.
That's beautiful, man. Hey, it's Jesse. And if you've been following this show, then you know I've had my fair share of struggles with alcohol over the years. You also know that I built a pretty solid toolkit to help maintain a healthy relationship with alcohol. Things like fitness, mindfulness, accountability groups, and technology. All great, all helpful. But there's one tool I've recently found that blew my mind, and I can't believe it took me so long to discover it. It's called naltrexone, an FDA-approved, science-backed, and affordable medication that helps reduce cravings and control drinking. The first time I took it, I'll never forget, I was skeptical and not completely buying into the idea that a medication can help me with drinking. But just after a few days, I could not believe how effective it was in eliminating all of my cravings for alcohol. It needs to be more better known. And that is where Or Health comes in. And I'm honored to have them as a sponsor of the show. You can have doctor-prescribed naltrexone shipped discreetly and directly to your door. No pharmacies, no doctor's offices, just the help you need. It's online, it's private, and it's judgment-free. And most importantly, it works. As of today, over 35,000 Or members have been treated, and 76% of respondents report drinking less in just 2 short weeks. So here's how to get started. Text STRENGTH to 710-710. That's STRENGTH to 710-710. You'll take a quick, discreet survey, and they'll guide you through the entire process of trying naltrexone for the first time. It's easy, straightforward, and honestly, might be the best move you make for yourself today. So if you're ready to take a massive step forward in controlling your alcohol intake, text STRENGTH to 710-710 and let Or Health help you redefine your relationship with alcohol. That's beautiful. On the topic of addiction, specifically substance use, I drank alcohol once for 15 years.
Right.
And I'll say this, how would I use breath work in those instances where I'm having just an incredibly strong craving to pick up when I normally would out of habit? And for me, that was always, not always, but later in life, like 5 or 6 o'clock at night, still processing the workday, but putting on my dad hat, my husband hat, and that in between, if I didn't have a chance, and this speaks to my nature,
to kind of check all the boxes and complete all of the outstanding things for that day. Like if like all of a sudden kids are yelling, dinner's going on the table, I feel very dysregulated and overstimulated. And one way that I always found habitually to turn that off was alcohol. How might I incorporate breath work in that moment, or maybe before it gets too far, to help me avoid turning to alcohol? And for some other people, it could be something else.
That's a great question. If you were my client and this was something you came to me with, we would work on two fronts. One, first and foremost, that we would work on a lot is learning about how to feel and how to feel okay with the way that you feel and how to address your emotions in a effective way. So that might sound like a lot of fluff, but it's really something that is founded in some of the gold standard research. And this is what I apply to my students. So we start learning how to develop your interoceptive awareness. So quite literally how to feel the physical sensations that accompany your emotions. What's so funny, and it's not haha funny, it's just terrible funny, is that no one really, it took me until my 40s, my early 40s, or maybe late 30s, I don't know, way too long to put two and two together and say, you know what, I feel my feelings. Like there are physiological signals that you're picking up that you don't like, and you're trying to do something about it. And so you don't drink alcohol anymore, but do you drink coffee?
Too much.
I mean, we're in America, right? This is an American show. You know, we can admit it.
I drink cold brew, double espresso, regular coffee, Celsius energy drinks. They're not a sponsor. I can just say that. Pre-workout before I lift, like you name it. Come on.
So we have so much in common, Jesse. This is it's actually starting to freak me out a little bit. Okay, so here it comes. If you drink you slug down your Celsius or whatever, there's like 200 milligrams of caffeine. Just throw down your espresso or whatever. You kind of look forward to getting that sensation of energy. It's like, all right, here I go. I'm going to go to the gym. I'm going to, whatever. I'm going to sit down and type because I need to get caffeinated for that. But imagine if you didn't put that into your system, right? And then you had that same feeling. It would freak you out.
It would,
right?
Yeah.
That is what happens for most people. Or that's, I guess, similar to what happens for most people when they feel emotions. Like we feel something, we don't know what it is, and it's scary. It's like, I don't even know why I'm feeling. And so it moves you toward actions that are not rational. And sometimes these are great, but we can't just say, okay, I'm just going to do whatever I feel like doing, because that's what led us. I often say the same impulses that led you to, kissing your wife for the first time are the same. It's coming from the same place as if, okay, I'm going to punch somebody, right? Those impulses we want to be able to process and think about. We want to be able to make more rational decisions that are not going to turn out to be habitual decisions or things we regret. So I would work with you on a lot of that. We have a lot of those tactics that ultimately, okay, this is how I feel. Let's work on feeling what we feel. And notice your breath. Notice how we can influence this slightly here. We're going to start working with that. That would be your daily thing. So at that point, that's sort of just in the process. The next thing I would do is I would give you some tools for the moment. Because
I see. So bulletproofing around like all the time, but then also some things you can pull out when it's already happening and it's kind of like too late.
That's right. That's right. Because there will be times whenever, even though you've built a great team, I always say you're building a really powerful team, the conscious and the unconscious, that's our goal. But as we build that team, we have to remember that team might be overwhelmed at some times. But the hope is that you have enough wherewithal to say, I'm being overwhelmed right now.
Yeah.
The vast majority of language of breath is ultimately learning that part. The techniques are sort of like, okay, so when do you apply them? What do they mean within the context with regards to your unconscious? Now that sounded kind of maybe far out there, but when we say the language of breath, we might say, okay, if I do this technique, it's gonna send a message into my nervous system. I don't want to make things worse. I want to make things better. It's like if you come home, your wife's upset or whatever. Anyone who's married knows you can make it a lot worse, right?
Oh, yeah.
Your tone, your inflection, all those things. So we want to have the wherewithal. Let's make it better. There are multiple techniques that you could do. And so if you were my client or any of my students, if you were one of their clients, we would work our way through to see which of these techniques work really well for you. And we build just a game plan. This is our battle strategy for when those things happen, because one of the things that I can guarantee you is that you're going to have crazy days. There's going to be those times, and you're going to have impulses. And so one of the techniques that I like to use, just to kind of give everybody a technique, is called the cadence of bliss, or sometimes it's called 4-7-8 breathing.
Okay. This
is one that you can literally do without anyone knowing you're doing it, which is great. And so what you're going to do is you're going to inhale for 4 seconds and really focus on expanding your ribs. Okay. So it's really important that you expand your ribs. Nasal only for the whole thing.
Okay.
And you're going to inhale for 4 seconds, expanding the ribs a whole bunch. Then you're going to hold your breath for 7 seconds. I'm going to guide us through here in just a second, but I just want to explain it first. You're going to hold your breath with full lungs for 7 seconds, and then you're going to exhale for 8 seconds. And that sounds easier than it might actually be.
It actually sounds hard, but go ahead.
Okay, good. All right. You're a very good gauge. 8-second exhale is not the easiest thing to do. So one thing you can do, you can use your lips, and you just purse your lips like you're breathing out through a straw. And that can help you lengthen that exhale to 8 seconds. We're trying to make it as even as possible. So let's just go ahead and we'll do 4 of these together. This is something that's usually pretty safe, even if you're maybe driving. But if you feel lightheaded, please do not continue. Please go back into normal breathing and wait until you're in a place where you can be safe and you're not going to swerve off the road. So let's go ahead and begin. We're going to take a deep breath in, just nice deep breath in, and just breathe it out nice and slow. This way we're all in the same count. Good. And then we're going to breathe in, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, out, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Good. In, expand, expand, expand. Hold with full lungs. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Relax it out. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Good. And just observe how you feel.
And so in the middle of it, there was some anxiety because I was like, "Oh darn, I can't hold my breath this long." It actually noticeable relaxation. Not sure how long it lasts, but like I feel more relaxed than I was going into that for sure. Is it important to like make? I've read somewhere, but like an audible out of your mouth, kind of when you breathe out, like that kind of like a grunt or something. Where did I hear that?
There are multiple. I love having people make a sound because it does help a person relax. However, the primary reason to make a sound is to lengthen the exhale. The lengthening of an exhale, so you can even test this. Like if you take your pulse, you can notice on an inhale versus an exhale, just notice the difference. On the exhale, you'll notice that your heart rate is slightly slower. And that is because you're stimulating your vagus nerve. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to stimulate that vagus nerve for as long as we can, really pulling that nervous system into more of a safety place and more of a relaxed state. And so singing, whistling, humming, all of those things, they're great ways to lengthen the exhale. And that's the primary reason.
Now, for folks just stepping into this that want to incorporate it, some type of daily breath work, right? For that kind of like round the clock bulletproofing. I'm assuming, would that be one of the techniques that you would recommend? And if so, or maybe there's another one, but like how many times should they do it? And how many cycles through? What would you recommend as like a basic intro to this?
Yeah, for a technique like this one, if it agrees with you, if it's something that is like, yeah, I don't really like this one. There's the good news is there's a lot more. But this one is one that most people really enjoy. And you might do 4 to 8 repetitions 3 times per day. And if you want to, if you're really going through, if you're struggling, you can say, okay, I'm going to do 4 to 8 repetitions. And then I'm going to take a minute where I just breathe normally. And then I'll do another 4 to 8 repetitions and then go on and go. You can continue on that for as long as you like. Usually we take a minute break between, just so that with this one, there is a slight diminishing of returns if you just keep going on and on and on. But one of the things that I guess the groups that of people that like this one the best is if you are ruminating. If you're a ruminator, an overthinker, and 3 a.m. rolls around and somehow you had to wake up, but then your default mode network turns on and then you start thinking of all the things. Well, try this out. 4, 7, 8. 4 to 8 repetitions, go back into normal breathing for about a minute. You don't have to time it out. I don't want you to do that in bed, right? But wait for a little bit of time, then do 4, 7, 8, 4 to 8 repetitions. Before you know it, you'll wake up the next morning because you've fallen asleep. It really is a powerful way to break through that anxiety and overthinking.
Just knocks you right out. I'm just thinking how I'm going to incorporate this in my life. So I've got this irritating filtered water system built into my fridge. I can't stand how long it takes to fill up a glass of water. And for me, I have this fun little game, like how bad is my day going is like whether I'm willing to wait the extra time to get that water versus just go to the faucet. So, but I told myself, I just started this, Jesse, because I knew you were coming on the show. I was like, you know what?
Good.
Whenever I fill up this dang water out of this slow filter, I'm going to use it to close my eyes and just take a couple of deep breaths, even if and I've found I've only been doing it for a day, so it's a small sample size. But that 1.5 minute experience will literally just kind of interrupt that ruminating for just enough time for me to feel a little less edge just walking off. And then of course life happens after that. But I guess maybe there's a serious point here. I'm sure there's so many of us have these little points in our day that can become cadences or become little triggers for us to be okay, this is when I'm going to do my breath work. Right here in this little random moment. For me, it's getting filtered water. So
it really, that's the start of a practice there, and one of the things that I think makes people not start something is that we hold such a high bar and we say, well, if it's not doing something 10 minutes in the morning, 10 minutes in the afternoon, 10 minutes in the evening. And then, if it's not that, then I just can't do anything.
Yeah.
Literally every breath you take. So whether you like it or not, every breath you take is influencing your nervous system. So it influences how well you digest your food. It influences how, what your blood sugar is. It influences, all of these things. So it is absolutely doing it anyway. Every breath you take does this. So when you add some consciousness and awareness to that breath and you say, okay, I'm just going to focus on slowing my breathing down. Maybe I'll just focus on exhaling nice and slow. I'm just going to take a deep breath down in the belly and then see how long I can exhale for. What you're doing right there is instead of all this chatter that was going on before, you're interrupting that and you're sending back a message of safety. It's okay. We're all right. We're going to be okay. And even if you're in a dangerous situation, and many of my students and many of my clients, that's their life. They live and work in the most dangerous situations possible. Even if you're in those dangerous situations, sending a message back of safety at least relaxes you enough so that you can take advantage of our social engagement network, right? So that way, okay, I'm not just seeing everything as an enemy. I can see, okay, there's other human beings out here. It engages you enough so that you can start to use some of your brain that quickly shuts down, sadly enough, under stress.
Yeah.
And so just those little things, I love, okay, you're going to drink water. Hopefully, you're drinking a few cups a day. You're supposed to, between all the caffeine.
Yeah. You gotta hydrate.
Should not just be coffee, right? Coffee, Celsius, and pre-workout should not be all we drink. So when you go get those glasses of water to dilute all of that, stuff, that's a fantastic time to say, okay, I'm going to take a little breath break.
Yeah. Heck yeah. The last thing on breath, because I know there's a couple of topics I want to get to with you, but I remember the first time I've ever gave a serious thought to breath work and incorporating it intentionally to slow my mind and whatnot. It came from Jocko Willink, who's, a famous Navy SEAL. I mean, that's the tip of the fighting spear in the American forces. And he was just sharing that, I think it was called box breathing was what him and his team would practice. But I mean, if Navy SEALs are doing it proactively and going into these life or death situations, I mean, that it's useful and it's a powerful tool. But I think in his case, it was box breathing. And if I'm not mistaken, but it was 4 in, hold for 4, exhale for 4, and then hold for another 4, and then go in. I think that's what he was advocating for. But yeah, it always stuck out to me as something I need to definitely incorporate into my life.
Yeah, absolutely. That is the most commonly traded breathwork technique in the military, and in first responders all are taught that. They call it tactical breathing. It's mentioned in a book which has it's just one of the coolest names of a book, On Killing. That's the name of the book. And that's where most people get it. They're like, of course, it's in that book. But yeah, it comes from an older technique called Sobriety from the yogic tradition. Which is fantastic. One thing I like about box breathing is you can just do it as long as you want. It slows down your breathing, so your breath rate slows down. It gives you something to focus on other than something else, right? Which is causing you stress. You have to count. So there's that counting sheep element to it. And it absolutely will balance your nervous system. And typically you want to do that for at least 2 minutes to really see the results. It takes a little bit of time for the message to get passed. One of the things I also am, I'm a recovering English professor. So the linguistic element, when I got into breathwork, I noticed that it's this inner linguistics that we're actually practicing with every breath. And so when we're sending a message via, in this case, breathing, we have to make sure that signal is received. So it usually takes about 2 minutes. And that's when you should really focus on your physical sensations, always bringing it back to those physical sensations. How do I actually feel? It's not what I'm thinking about. It's how my physiology is my physiology changing? Can I pick up any signals that way? One of the downsides about box breathing is that it requires you to count, right? So some of the upside is that it does. So when I developed a curriculum for the Indianapolis Police Academy. So all the police that go through there, they use my curriculum. It's called Breathwork Tactics. But I train in this program. We do firefighters and just everybody, all the different first responders. And it all started from, there was a police chief that reached out to me, and he had read my first book, A Practical Guide to Breathwork. And about that time, there was an officer that was shot, and he was bleeding out, and he remembered box breathing. And the fire chief was like, I sure wish my officers would remember these things before, it's like these instances. But the problem is sometimes it's difficult to apply. So one of the things we teach all of the officers is literally just the power of functional breathing and lengthening the exhale. If you can just do a functional breath, right, pulling it down into the abdominal area as opposed to just shoulders and chest, really bringing it down, expanding, and just relaxing the exhale. You don't have to count. You can do this while driving and operating other things, and it allows you to still continue to down throttle that nervous system so you can think more clearly.
Yeah. Well said and well explained. I know I keep looking on my shoulder. You've got a bunch of awesome resources on breathwork. So I'm going to point everyone there. Obviously, watch this segue, right? Because I'm a professional podcast host. Jesse, you ready for this segue?
Getting the popcorn. I'm getting it. Yeah.
Here we go. So two times that I found breathwork to be really, really helpful. One, I'm a drummer and I have played in front of some big shows, and I found that by using breathwork immediately before the set starts, incredible impact on my focus. And then two, and here's the segue for you, while doing cold exposure. So cold exposure is the segue. I know you were waiting for that.
I love it.
So I've noticed in the limited time, because I've never really stuck to a cold exposure practice of my own consistently, but I've noticed, particularly when I try to do it in the shower. And we're going to go into this. If you don't have access to some, tub in your basement or something, can you use the shower? But I've noticed that when I get under that cold water or in that cold water, my heart goes, my focus goes. It's kind of like that, oh shit feeling. But I've noticed as soon as I can wrangle in my breathing, the pain and the focus literally just shifts huge. But let's talk about cold exposure in the same way we did breathwork. If you could, how would you define it? For just assume people have no idea what we're talking about and why crazy people would jump into cold water. And then we'll talk about the health benefits and the holistic benefits of it.
Yeah, well, right now, cryotherapy or cold immersion therapy is sort of all the rage. It's really kind of blowing up. It's something, ultimately, any use of thermal challenge is really good for you. It allows you to challenge your ability to maintain core body temperature. So this can be something as simple as walking outside on a chilly day without a coat, or it can be something like, jumping into a frozen over lake or, cold shower. There's a lot of different ways to do it. But ultimately what we're trying to do is we're working for a hormetic response, which is our body's ability to become stronger even though we have stressors. So with a hormetic response, if you don't stress yourself at all, you become weaker. So if you think about, for instance, the poor astronauts that were up in space for God knows how long, they lost bone mass, they lost muscle mass. When they landed, I can only imagine how that felt. And that's because they didn't get the stress of walking around, just gravity, things like that. And so we see that we become less resilient in the absence of certain stressors. If we stress ourselves too much, we can kill ourselves, right? So if you go to the gym and, we always say we're going to lift all the weights, but if you actually lifted all the weights, yes, you will kill yourself. I mean, it was just totally lethal. But if you give yourself the right amount of stress and you give yourself the right amount of recovery, so you have to recover, then you can come back stronger and more resilient. And that's the reason why cold training has become popular. It's because there have been some benefits that people have seen as they've continued their cold training practice. This is something I talk about in my most recent book, A Practical Guide to Cold Training. Just the names, I don't know why. I was like, I'm just going to name it just exactly what it is, sir.
I like
just
it. Practical and tactical.
Nothing fancy.
Yeah, no, it's good. It works. Now I know you're an English professor or whatever, so
right,
your words matter to you. I got you. What are those benefits, Jesse?
So there are a lot more benefits that are reported than that actually exist. I love cold training. I use it in a lot of my trainings, a lot of my clients. There are a lot of touted benefits. Some people say it will boost your testosterone.
Yeah,
other people say
I've heard that
it's not true. So other people will say that it will make it so you never get sick again.
We got a hot take here. I like it. Go ahead.
Yeah, right. I wish it were true.
Me too.
I'm going to the gym, right? I've been doing it now for a little over 10 years. But the thing is, I've never seen an improvement. In fact, sometimes I've seen a person have to stop taking cold or ice baths in order to improve their fertility to get pregnant. So I will say that I have never had a negative reaction when it comes to testosterone, but I've never had a positive reaction. And I think that there's a lot more bro science to that than there is real science. The real science, I will say, that we can for sure say is that when you get into the cold, you will naturally secrete norepinephrine. And this is a really powerful thing for anti-inflammation. So norepinephrine is one of the strongest endogenous anti-inflammatory agents that we produce. And it's also something it's important for attentiveness. So if you want to wake up, you want to become more alert, without the jitters, you can still have your coffee afterwards. It's a different mechanism. But if you want to get that alertness and you would like to reduce your inflammation, cold training not only does a great job with that, but it's been shown to not have any kind of tolerance. I mean, this is the right show to talk about tolerance, right? I mean, we built up some tolerances. You don't get a tolerance. So, which is great because, for my addiction, it was not alcohol. It was the painkillers that they'll give you whenever you have an injury. Right. And so this is a fantastic thing because you have a reliable anti-inflammatory at your disposal. It seems to boost our immune function. Okay, so your immune system is a really complex part of your nervous system. It's not like you have this lever in your physiology somewhere. It's like immune system, just crank that up. It's not really how that works, but it does seem to boost our immune system. One of the mechanisms that I think goes underreported that I'd love to tell your audience about is simply the fact that when we engage in cold training, we become better at staying warm. So we actually improve our ability to thermoregulate.
Makes sense. Logically, that makes sense. Go on.
Right? Yeah. It's just a very, very, it's like, okay, well, I'm able to maintain my body temperature better. You have to understand that that when a virus, so for instance, the viruses that gives us colds and flus, right? So a rhinovirus or a coronavirus, they are what we call enveloped viruses. And what that means is there's a membrane over the genetic material. In the cold, that membrane becomes really rigid and durable. And that's one of the reasons why we have more colds and flus in the wintertime. When it's warm, it becomes permeable. And if it's warm enough, the genetic material is completely exposed and it dies. So it just so happens to be that our body temperature protects us from that. And so our ability to thermoregulate, it's directly related to our immune system. That's part of our immune system, but part of our immune response. So it does that as well. Another thing that I think is the most important one, and this goes back to what we were talking about earlier with implicit learning. Getting into an ice bath is hard. Getting into a cold shower is hard. It is not a pleasant thing. And I've been doing it for 10 years.
And it sounds like
right?
you don't get better at it because you don't build up tolerance. It always sucks.
You build up, I guess you do build up what they call body hardening in some of the research, right? So you do build, it's not as bad as you get used to it, right? To a certain degree, but it's never like, yay, I get to go for this cold shower whenever the warm water is right there. I could just do that, but no, I'm going to do this cold shower. There's always that level of, oh man, and so you can look forward to it sort of like you look forward to going to the gym, but like whenever you get to the last few reps, that hurts, right? Every time you get to the last few reps, it's like, that's sort of what that experience is like when you're in the ice bath. It's like, oh boy. What I have seen in myself and what I believe to be the biggest benefit of cold training is it goes back to implicit learning. You start to see yourself as a person who can make a difficult decision. You start to see yourself as a person who's very resilient and capable of overcoming your fears and stress. And that is something that you cannot buy. You have to earn. And so I think that right there is the greatest reason. I remember, what was it in Goggins, right? So Goggins was training, I forget the rapper guy, and his wife was like, why are you making him go out into this cold water? What are the health benefits? He's like, no benefits at all, man. There are none.
That's funny.
And even if there were no biological benefits, I would still do it specifically because I can see the psychological benefits. And that, again, your life is the result of your actions. That's what's going to get you where you really want to go. If I have a cold, but I'm still taking positive actions and I'm doing good things, if I have some inflammation, if I have low T or whatever, but I'm still taking positive actions, I'm still doing good things with my life, I'm still there for my family, I'm still pretty happy.
Look, for some reason, when it comes to mental health and recovery from alcohol misuse, people don't talk about supplements enough. When I decided to step away from alcohol and rebuild my health, I quickly learned that nutrition and supplementation weren't just optional, they're essential. That's why I choose Momentous supplements. Look, for me, the goal has always been about health span, living better for longer. And when it comes to supplements for high performers, nobody does it like Momentous. Momentous invests heavily in NSF certification, meaning every batch of their products is tested for heavy metals, harmful additives, and label claim accuracy. You got to know what you're putting in your body. And that's why Momentous is trusted by all 32 professional NFL teams and D1 collegiate sports team dietitians across the country. And look, Momentous doesn't offer every supplement under the sun. Other brands can do that just fine. Instead, Momentous nails the basics with bone-crushing consistency to help you build the perfect and intentional routine for you. And when we talk about basics, what are we talking about? What do I take? I take their protein,
and their creatine. Momentous Protein is best in class for muscle repair and growth, while their CreaPure creatine, the purest form of creatine monohydrate, supports both physical strength and cognitive performance. These are foundational supplements that I continue to use to this day in my health journey for physical strength, mental fitness, and emotional resilience. So whether you're taking your first step or your next step in your fitness journey, these supplements are the building blocks of living better longer. Go to livemomentous.com and try it today at 20% off with code STRENGTH. That's livemomentous.com, 20% off with code STRENGTH, and start living on purpose today.
Yeah, heck yeah. And look, there's something to be said. I remember when I've done it, like starting your day, like doing something hard, there's a reason why people say like do hard things. I know it's like a cute, like kind of in rally right now, but you do hard things because you build mental toughness and resilience, which carries over into like confidence and so many other psychological benefits from it. So at the very least, to your point, even if biologically, and you heard it here first from Jesse Coomer, it does not increase your testosterone, which is going to let a lot of people down. But
I know. I don't want it to be true. I really don't want it. I want to like, oh yes, I started taking testosterone pills. Oh yeah, well I just take cold showers and it does twice as good as TRT. I want that, but I'm sorry, it's just don't expect that.
Well, I've got a new, here's a little PSA. I've got a new sponsor coming on the show, Momentous Supplements. If you heard of them, they're starting in January. They make something called Tonkat Ali. So if you lose your testosterone booster from cold showers, you can hop over to Momentous. I don't have a little promo code yet. We're working on it, but Momentous Supplements, you heard it first. Jesse, I got a question for you. Of all the things you said there, before I ask you to go into like an introductory practice that people can incorporate today and this week, you mentioned inflammation. I have a question for myself and also just to make sure my audience understands what inflammation is, because it's something that, because I can't really see it, it's hard for me to wrap my head around. But I know inflammation is, I think the more common understanding of it is I have an injury, the muscles or ligaments or tissues around that injury are inflamed. I can see it, it's swollen, I'll apply ice, it'll go away. But there's also, is there not, like a cellular inflammation that can be indicative of someone who's not leading a healthy lifestyle? Maybe they're overindulging with substances. Maybe they're not sleeping enough. But inflammation is a massive, massive driver of illness, sickness, even some things like cancer and other diseases. So all of that to ask a question, and correct me if I was wrong, but when you're talking about cold exposure helping with inflammation, it might be so much more than meets the eye.
Yes. And I will say that it's not going to completely make all inflammation go away, and it's not the panacea to an unhealthy lifestyle, right? But yeah, inflammation, I try not to oversimplify things, but maybe a very simple way of looking at inflammation is that it's your way of your body saying, hey, heal this, right? Put attention here, please put attention here. So much of our lives now, something that we all relate to, okay, you have a bruise or a cut or a broken this or that, you have inflammation. Hey, put attention here, Hey, look over here, but there is a lot of chronic inflammation that it just kind of slowly emerges. If a person is carrying a lot of extra body fat, there's a lot of chronic inflammation that results in that. And there's a whole cascade of negative effects. But one of the things that it also does is it keeps us from moving. It keeps us from acting, right? And my chorus, the thing that I want everyone, all my students, all my clients, everybody that I ever put in a workshop, it is your actions. You got to take action. I don't care what health practices you do. If you just sit there and wait for life to happen to you, it's not going to. You have to take action. You have to get out there and you have to do your life. And if you are in a lot of pain, right? If it hurts it hurts to walk, hurts to move around, you're less likely to do those things. And so when we do things to improve how we feel, we're more likely to remove the barriers to taking those actions. So that way we can get out in the gym, we can do all the things we want to do. And inflammation can be a huge barrier to that. So
yeah, heck yeah. Let's get into, because I want to maximize my time with you, because I do want to get a little bit into the kind of healthy supplementation, nutrition recommendations you have. But one last question on cold exposure. give me maybe 2 different weekly practices for people just jumping in, literally, to either maybe give me one kind of practice for someone that's jumping into like a traditional cold tub or maybe even a tub in their home, how often and for how long. And then if they don't have access to one of those tools, maybe talk through what it looks like to just jump into a cold shower, how often, how long, etc.
Yeah. So with your cold shower is the easiest. One of the best things you can do is just add 30 seconds to a minute at the end of a hot shower. One of the best studies that's ever been published, that's what they did. And they showed a huge reduction in sick days. So just simply doing that, you're adding a lot to your life. You can add time to the end of your shower if you'd like, but 30 seconds to a minute, something like that. That's typically all you'd need to do.
Over the head, back of the neck. Does it matter where the water hits you?
So ideally, you want to avoid the head, and just focus on your torso. So focusing a bit arms, legs, just everything under the neck. That's the primary thing, because what you're really trying to do is you're trying to challenge your ability to maintain body temperature. And I mean, that's the basics. Getting it on your head, sometimes you can get an ice cream headache the other way. And in extreme cases, like I live in Chicago, well, you're in northern Colorado. So, I mean, the showers are going to get cold. And whenever you get too much cold on your head, you can have some vasoconstriction in the brain, and you can pass out, and you don't want to do that. So just focus on your everything below the neck. When it comes to cold plunging, be careful with this. Do it in a very controlled environment. In fact, just get my book.
Yeah.
Just get my book. And it's not just because I'm trying to sell books. I literally wrote the thing because there's this has exploded so much that people are just doing so many stupid things. And so you wouldn't do this. I mean, I guess you would. A lot of people go to the gym and they try to, they haven't worked out since they were 18, and they walk in and they're 40 and they try to do a workout they did when they're 18. That's what I see in the cold training world, but they didn't even do anything when they're 18. So they try to get in, they try to set records and all this crazy stuff. Just go slow, go real slow. Look at it as a long game, not as I got to get my money's worth out of this ice bath. And the all you can eat buffet mentality that does not go far for you in cold plunging. So just be really careful with it, because you don't have the mechanisms of feedback that you would in the gym. So in the gym, you get to a point where you have muscle failure. You don't have that. You don't have that feedback with cold training. And so what happens is, actually, the longer you're in the cold, eventually you're going to start to feel warm. And then you start thinking, oh, I have become a master of cold. But the reality is that's one of the first signs that you have hypothermia. So, and then you're going to die. Yeah. So don't die. It will ruin your day.
Yeah. It feels counterintuitive.
It's just not going to be a healthy move for you. So take it slow. The reason I wrote the book is because people really do need to be careful with the cold.
Yeah. So on the cold plunge side, like, what do you think? Like, jump in, submerge your whole torso, 30 seconds to a minute, a couple times a week?
Just be careful with the temperature. Just be careful. Start maybe around 50 degrees, 60 degrees, something like that. So once or twice a week, start off. I have charts in the book, and that's literally, just go slow, don't force it, and never stay in the cold to the point where you just can't stand it anymore. You always get out of the cold whenever you're still feeling great.
Got it. Okay, good. With the time that we have left, Jesse, can you just recommend some, I don't know whether to call them supplements, nutritional kind of advice? I know I'll start up with this. I want to talk about kava a little bit, but anything.
Yeah. Let's just talk about kava.
Let's go into kava. Sure.
Yeah. So I have been using kava for a long time. Kava came under a lot of scrutiny in the early 2000s because it is something you do not want to drink alcohol and do kava at the same time. It's toxic for your liver to do that. But if used in moderation and without alcohol, it's a very safe and non-addictive herb. Now, everything can be addictive. I know that conversation, but I have used kava since I was like 16 years old, and here I am 44 now. It's something that it's difficult to abuse because like with alcohol, you can get drunker and drunker and drunker. With kava, you have your first, what we call a shell or your first serving. And that's usually the best. That's like, hey, I feel really good. And then after that, it's not like you feel bad, but you just kind of feel tired. And you just want to go to sleep.
What does it feel like?
It's its own thing, first of all. So a lot of times a person compares it to drinking a couple of beers. If you're trying to avoid alcohol or something like that, it doesn't feel the same. It helps you relax. It increases GABA in your brain in a healthy way, right? So it increases GABA in the brain. So it relaxes you. It has some muscle relaxing properties to it. Occasionally, I will say, you know what? I just feel like having a little kava tonight. So kava comes from the pepper family. And there are these things called kava lactones. And they do have these... there's an analgesic effect that you get whenever you ingest it. So you get sort of the numb mouth with the kava, but you just get a nice relaxed feeling. How would you describe your feeling whenever you?
Well, yeah. Well, the one time I had it in that way, because I did also buy a tincture once when I was like dropping it into my NA beverages, and I don't recall ever having a noticeable cognitive kind of shift doing it that way. But to answer your question, it felt like it just, I hate to use the word relaxed again, but it slowed my thinking down, and I became a little bit more lighter, I would say, just in general. Like it just felt like it turned down some of the noise in my ruminating brain.
Yeah, it's not like marijuana. It's not like alcohol. It's just super chill, super relaxing, and it's not something that I can see like. Even of course, I don't ever recommend doing it before you drive. But even if you did it before you drive, it's not like you're impaired. It's not like, oh my God, I just drank kava. And maybe you're too relaxed to really want to do your taxes, but you could still do your taxes.
That's a good way to put it. Yeah, you know how I used it. It's like for me, it's less about what the thing is and more like I like to have some type of drink or something to insert when I would have had an alcoholic drink. So as a baseline, just having a substitute to pass the time of that dysregulated state, I find that useful. But then on top of that, the reason I've landed on kava, the reason I want to ask you about it, is because I do think it would be even more helpful if there's something that can just change my emotional state a little bit, which is familiar to me. So people like in the throes of addiction need to be careful about substitutions. But I found that kava was the effects were so mild and benign, but I still felt them. And it worked for me. And I'm actually interested in getting back into having like a nightly ritual as well. It sounds like what you found there with that instant product. So
yeah, it makes it's not a long drawn out process. You can just kind of have your kava drink. You have to constantly stir it because it's more of a suspension than anything. But yeah, and I don't have enough time to really dig into all of it. But I would say for those people who are overcoming their addiction, if you're trying to get out of that, the two best supplements that I can recommend to you, two things that I used as I was coming out of the roughest times, is L-theanine, which is an amino acid that comes from the from green tea, but whenever you distill it by itself, it's a very relaxing, it's mellowing out type of a thing. Again, it's not something that's going to impair you at all. And kava. Those are the two that I couldn't recommend more. I don't feel like there's really any kind of danger of abuse. We're in America, so I'm sure, hold my beer is, I think we invented that phrase, but I really don't see a big possibility for abuse. And as far as side effects, I don't know of any for theanine. With kava, you'll just want to check to make sure you don't have liver problems already. Even though, I do feel like it's a safe thing, but in some cases it can cause liver damage, especially for those people who have liver problems already. And if you just really overdo it, I don't know how far you'd have to go with kava in order to really make that happen. But as long as you're not mixing it with alcohol and things like that, kava is very safe, hard to really see a person having a problem there.
Got it. Got that. So kava and theanine. Look, I know we're up against time. Jesse, I'll say this, your vocabulary is ridiculous. We're going to have a really hard time with the captions post-production here. I'll make sure to get the spelling right of all these things. But before I let you go, we mentioned your book, we mentioned your website. Of course, I'll link to all the places. But anything else you want to let my audience know that you're excited about, that you're working on, and where they can find you?
Yeah, right now I'm in the middle of we're accepting applications. If you want to be a breath coach, if you'd like to add breathwork to what you offer, or if it's something that you would like to get into yourself, you can look up jessecoomer.com, or you can go to languageofbreathcollective.com. We're taking applications for the 2025 class, which starts in April, and it culminates in an in-person capstone class in Utah. So we're going to go to Bryan Head, Utah, in the mountains, and it's just going to be amazing. So if those are things that you're interested in, check us out, and feel free to reach out. Of course, my books are also on my website as well.
Roger that. And we'll link to all the places. Jesse, man, it's been awesome. I think we both realized it could probably go for another couple hours, but hopefully we did your topics justice here.
It's been a pleasure.
All right. Jesse Coomer, everybody. Live deep.
That's the show, folks. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you were entertained. Hope you learned something there about breath work and or cold exposure, and even some supplements, things you can try. For me, just, finding little windows in the day to do those little practices, whether it's box breathing or any of the techniques that Jesse, taught us there. Hope you can start incorporating those incrementally throughout the year and just find presence and find health. And that's what the show is all about. Look, I always like to ask, this is my little pitch, if you could, it would just mean so much to me if you could take a second, if you haven't already, to follow our show, to give a rating and a review if you're up for it. And I think most importantly, if you think this show has anything to offer, whether that's information, entertainment, inspiration, or otherwise, please forward it to somebody. The algorithm is a thing, and apparently the more movement brings more follow and engagement, the more people can get some help from this show. So please, if you would, take a second to follow, leave a review, and otherwise. And thank you for that. And with that, as I always do, I'd like to send you off into the week with an inspirational quote, this time from Chinese philosopher and author Lao Tzu. Man, this one's good. And it reads, "If you are depressed, you are living in the past. If you are anxious, you are living in the future. If you are at peace, you are living in the present." Thank you for joining the Sober Strength Show. Live deep.